Funny, cartoon, animals. What's not to love about them? They transcend time, culture, and language. Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1920s covered the same niche that Aesop's fables did in 5th century Greece, and that something like Bluey does today. It's highly likely that you grew up watching movies or shows featuring non-human characters. Kids today certainly are. But have you ever looked at these characters' designs in a deeper way? Probably not. But that's what I'm here for. If you're active at all in the animation community, you've probably seen posts like this, but with a different character every time. It doesn't take a keen eye to notice that most of the time, the female character, animal, alien, or otherwise, will conform to Western gender expectations even when the male character does not. But why is this the case? And what kind of impact does it have on the kids watching? Since that's a lot to unpack, I have split the video up into 4 parts. The common design choices, why they look like that, impacts on kids, and if it's getting better. There's going to be timestamps in the description for each of these if I can figure out how to do that. Also, just to narrow down the scope of this project, I'm only focusing on cartoon pairs like Lola and Bugs Bunny or Stitch and Angel. If I have more time in the future, maybe I'll revise this. Now, let's get into it. Part 1. Common design choices. Let's do the fun part first. What are some of the common design choices used to identify the gender of cartoon characters? A scholar by the name of Sam Abel suggested in one of their papers that there are 3 typifications of human female cartoon characters: the domestic women, the comic old women, and the sex symbol. The domestic women is what we commonly associate with Disney princesses. They're usually pretty, passive, and uphold any positive gender roles associated with women. The comic old woman is pretty self-explanatory. She is older and often ugly. The comedy with her comes from the way that she contrasts the domestic women. The sex symbol is also pretty straightforward. This is just a character that's over-sexualized. Sometimes she can present conflict in the story, like trying to manipulate the main character, but she's usually just there to oogle at. I found that these typifications remain largely the same for non-human characters. It doesn't surprise me that this is the case. Most animated creatures are meant to be stand-ins for humans anyways. With that in mind, I have adapted Abel's observations into 2 distinct groups. Remember that this is all operating under the condition that the main character is male. First, we have the love interest. The love interest is usually what comes to mind when thinking of animated animal women. These characters usually look like the main male character, but pink, with eyelashes, or a dress. While the male character gets to look like a normal animal or have a compelling alien design, the love interest has to conform to human gendered stereotypes. In terms of personality, she is usually kind, even-tempered, and gentle, but this isn't always the case. Sometimes these tropes are subverted in the name of feminism, and she becomes independent and sassy, but is still ultimately a tiger with a facelift. The second group is the sexy fish. These are the characters that are usually made fun of. I named this one after Lola and Shark Tale specifically, but some others include the sloths from Ice Age and this chicken from Rockadoodle. The common traits found in sexy fish characters are over-sexualization, such as adding pronounced boobs when there shouldn't be any at all, and the characters themselves being shallow, jealous, and vindictive. They often serve antagonistic roles in the story, usually wanting to take advantage of the male character's attraction to them. While love interest characters can sort of remain stylistically consistent within the world, these ones look more human-like than everyone else. It's important to note that a character can be both a love interest and a sexy fish. The main way to distinguish between the two is by determining if the character is antagonistic or not, but somebody like Lola Bunny arguably fits both these roles. These 2 categories are admittedly pretty arbitrary, but being able to recognize a character that's clearly either or is important. I also chose not to adapt Abel's comic old woman typification simply because there's not a lot of animal characters that fit into it. Part 2. Why? Since this is such a niche topic, there isn't much in the way of research. This means that I can't really find a solid answer as to why we feel the need to affirm the gender of non-human characters to this extent. From what I've observed as an artist and as someone who has watched a lot of animation documentaries, a lot of these tropes originated as shorthands to distinguish the characters. Like, if Minnie wasn't drawn distinctly enough from Mickey, audiences in the 1920s would probably confuse the two. This doesn't work nearly as well when you factor in voice-acted cartoons, though. I'll play some audio now from a 1920s Mickey Mouse cartoon, and I want you to guess if Mickey or Minnie is on screen. Now try this one from the 1930s.
Cheer up, oh lovely princess, for you'll be rescued soon. I'll take thee away so ye won't have to stay and marry that silly baboon.
The one from the 30s was probably much easier to decipher, but they're actually both Mickey. We can usually tell the difference between a man's voice and a woman's voice, so do we really need all these extra descriptors? One explanation for their application in modern times is that cartoons are supposed to be a simplification of reality. It doesn't really matter if, in real life, male and female cats look like this. If they want to bring home the fact that this is a boy and a girl, then they need to look like this. As Abel puts it, gender in the world of animation may reflect the values and structures of society at large, but in a way that emphasizes and clarifies its prevalent features. Another explanation is the gender neutrality of male language. Considering that we use gendered terms like he and guys as umbrella terms, maybe it's no surprise that Daffy can exist as a normal duck and be perceived as male, but Tina needs to have hair and a full face of makeup before we see her as female. However, the one that is the most likely to be true, especially in children's media, is the profit incentive. If you can sell a blue dog to boys and a pink dog to girls, that's better than selling two normal-looking dogs to everyone. Since toys are very gendered already, and most children's media needs to make money from toys, it's much easier to build that binary into the movie itself. Part 3.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Once again, there is basically no scientific research about this specific thing. For this section, I'm going to pull a lot from studies related to Disney princesses. Bear with me. It's well known in the field of both developmental and gender psychology that children see extreme polarities between men and women. It's partially due to natural observation, like noticing that men typically have deep voices and beards while women don't, but most of it has to do with socialization. Socialization can essentially come from anywhere. Parents, teachers, friends, and of course popular media will all influence the way kids see each other. So, what is something like this saying to children? Well, we don't know for sure. We do know, though, that exposing young girls to extreme gender stereotypes through Disney princesses will make them behave in a more gender stereotypical way. Children will absorb and model basically anything they see. If womanhood is shown to be pink and eyelashes and love, that schema will stick with them. Part 4. Is it getting better? What if I told you? It isn't always like this. For every 100 or so Lola from Shark Tales, there's a Marlin's wife from Finding Nemo or something. I don't know. The truth is, while there are some diamond in the rough characters, most of them do end up conforming to these negative stereotypes in one way or another. I do think the best time for creature designs is right now, though. We are very slowly getting out of the situation we were in the 2010s with the sparkly eyelash dress female characters, as we are now being propelled by the realization of, wait, they should probably just look like animals. A lot of this is done by reworking old female characters, or designing new characters that don't really fit into all the stereotypes.
That's Louie!
Oh, yeah, because he's blue.
I'm a girl!
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
Just in general, artists are finding new ways to portray the gender of characters without making the woman the one who is different. Although it's still too soon to tell, this may soon change children's opinions about the polarities of men and women and let themselves see each other as equals. So, you just listened to me talk about cartoon characters for 10 minutes. What can you take away from it? First of all, it's important to recognize the patterns when we see them. This lets us consume media critically and through a feminist lens. The point of this isn't to say that you're a monster for enjoying Space Jam. Rather, it's about acknowledging that there are parts of Space Jam that aren't so great, and being able to understand why that's the case. Another important takeaway is, unironically, think of the children. Remember that kids, especially young kids, will model behavior that they think is acceptable. Once again, I am not suggesting that you should outlaw Paw Patrol in your future household, but it is a good idea to sit down with your kids after they watch it and try to deconstruct the gendered things that they just saw. I am suggesting that you should outlaw Shark Tale though. I really, really hate that movie. But seriously, thank you so much for watching. I know if you are watching this, you're either Dr. Stewart or somebody in my gender studies class, which means that, like, in either case, you have a lot of stuff on your plate. So I'm happy that you took almost 11 minutes to let me talk about cartoons. It really means a whole lot. Thank you. Bye.